I only lit one candle for my mother at the fundraiser, a small white candle with a yellow donor label. When the flame caught, I saw the name no one expected: Leah Whitmore Endowment, $2,100,000. My name, my mother's money. And the organization receiving it was the fund overseen by Harold Slate, my stepfather. He grabbed the candle from my hand, whispering, "Put it out." I didn't. He shoved my shoulder hard in front of the board, but Harold didn't know one thing. Tonight wasn't just about candles. There were files, cameras, banks, and me. My name is Leah Whitmore, and I learned early that some dinner tables have invisible lines down the middle. You can't see them, but trust me, you feel them every single meal. I'm 34 now, working as a compliance and internal investigations specialist at Rivergate Children's Hospital here in Riverton, Ohio. It's a job that suits me. Digging through documents, following paper trails, making sure everything adds up the way it should. Maybe I gravitated toward it because I spent so many years watching things not add up at home. Home. That word still catches in my throat when I think about the house on Maple Ridge Drive. Mom's house, technically, though Harold Slate made sure everyone knew he was managing the estate after she died. Harold, my stepfather, Colin's actual father, and the man who never let me forget which child carried his DNA. Colin got the corner bedroom with the bay window. Colin got the new car at 16. Colin got the "that's my boy" shoulder claps at every family gathering. I got the converted study and constant reminders to be grateful Harold kept me under his roof after Mom passed. "Your mother would want you to appreciate what we have here," Harold would say. Usually while showing off renovation plans for another property development, he'd spread blueprints across the same dining table where we ate our split-down-the-middle dinners, pointing out projected returns and market valuations like he was teaching a masterclass in success. The thing is, Mom left me plenty, at least she was supposed to. The Evelyn Whitmore Family Trust. I'd seen the documents once, years ago, when I helped Mom organize papers during her first round of chemo. "This is for you, sweetheart," she'd said, her thin fingers tracing the beneficiary lines. "So you'll never have to depend on anyone." But Harold became co-trustee when they married, and sole trustee after she died. "For your protection," he explained, with that particular smile that never reached his eyes. Complex financial instruments need experienced management. I moved out the day I turned 18, put myself through college, built my own life. The divorce last year was rough, but I handled it. I'm good at handling things quietly, professionally, maybe too good. Which brings me to next week's event, the Riverton Arts and Healing Foundation's annual Night of Candles fundraiser, Harold's Baby. He co-chairs the board with Margaret Winslow, one of those old-money philanthropists who thinks charity galas solve everything. The foundation supposedly funds art therapy programs and healing initiatives throughout Central Ohio. Beautiful mission, beautiful marketing, beautiful tax write-offs. I've been tracking their 990 forms for months now. Call it professional curiosity. Call it the compliance officer in me who can't turn off that particular radar. Or call it what it really is, the gut feeling that Harold's been using my mother's name for something she never would have supported. "You should come," Colin mentioned last week, showing up at my apartment uninvited like he always does when Harold wants something. "Dad says families should support family causes." Family, there's that word again, sharp as a paper cut. "I'll think about it," I told him, already knowing I'd go, not for family, not for Harold, but because something about the foundation's latest donor report made my compliance instincts light up like a fire alarm. The Leah Whitmore Endowment, listed right there in their annual report, tucked between the Morrison Family Fund and the Hartley Foundation, $2.3 million in total contributions. I never signed anything, never authorized anything. That money, my mother's money, my money, sitting in an endowment I didn't create, funding God knows what. Tomorrow, I'm pulling every public record I can access. By next week's gala, I'll know exactly what Harold's been doing with Mom's trust. And if it's what I think it is, well, let's just say I've gotten very good at my job. Documentation, evidence, paper trails. Harold taught me that family supports family causes. He just never specified which family would be doing the supporting and which would be paying the price. The grand ballroom at the Riverside Hotel glowed with 1,000 white candles. Each one represented a donation, a life touched, a promise of healing, or so the glossy programs claimed. I stood near the memorial table, watching Harold work the room in his tailored navy suit, shaking hands and accepting praise for another successful fundraiser. "Leah, you came!" Margaret Winslow appeared at my elbow, air kissing my cheek with practiced precision. "Harold mentioned you might attend. It's so wonderful when family supports our mission." I smiled, the kind I'd perfected during divorce depositions. Wouldn't miss it. The memorial candles sat on a raised platform draped in ivory silk. Each bore a small yellow label with the donor's name and contribution amount. The tradition, according to the program, allowed major benefactors to light a candle in memory of loved ones while celebrating their generosity. I waited until the formal program began, until Harold stood at the podium delivering his speech about transforming grief into grace, loss into legacy. The crowd hung on every word. Colin stood in the front row, recording on his phone for social media. That's when I moved to the memorial table. The candles were arranged alphabetically. I found it in the third row, a pristine white pillar candle, untouched, its yellow label printed in elegant script. Leah Whitmore Endowment, $2,300,000. My hands didn't shake. Working in compliance teaches you to stay calm when you find the smoking gun. I pulled out my lighter. Yes, I'd brought one, and lit the candle. The flame caught immediately, casting shadows across the label, making those numbers dance. "What are you doing?" Harold's voice came from directly behind me. He'd left the podium mid-speech, crossed the room in seconds. The microphone was still on, carrying the echo of his last words about honoring those we've lost. "Lighting a candle for Mom," I said, loud enough for the people now turning to watch. "Isn't that what donors do?" His face shifted through several colors: red, white, that particular shade of gray that meant he was calculating damage control. "Put it out." "Why? It has my name on it." "Leah." He grabbed for the candle. I pulled it back, and his hand closed around my wrist instead. "Put it out." "But it says I donated $2.3 million. Don't I get to—" The shove came fast and hard. His palm connected with my shoulder, sending me stumbling backward into the table. Candles wobbled. Someone gasped. The event photographer's camera clicked repeatedly, the flash strobing across Harold's furious face and my stumbling form. "Don't you dare," he hissed, leaning close enough that I could smell his bourbon breath. "Open your mouth about that number." Security arrived then. Two men in dark suits who looked between us uncertainly. Harold straightened his tie. Transformation instant. "My stepdaughter is feeling overwhelmed," he announced, that public smile snapping back into place. "The memorial service tomorrow. You understand. Perhaps some air. But I wasn't done. As security approached, I held up my phone, showing the photo I'd just captured. The candle label in perfect focus, every digit of that $2.3 million crisp and clear. Then I pressed record, catching Harold's voice as he continued damage control. "This is a misunderstanding," he was saying to Margaret Winslow, who'd rushed over. "A clerical error with the labels. You know how emotional these family situations can be." "Emotional?" I kept my voice steady, professional. "I'm curious about a financial discrepancy, that's all." The security guards hesitated. Throwing out a grief-stricken family member was one thing. Ejecting someone asking about money at a fundraiser? That was lawsuit territory. Harold made the calculation too. He stepped back, hands spread in paternal concern. "Of course, we should discuss this privately, after the event." I nodded, pocketed my phone, and walked toward the exit on my own. Behind me, I heard Harold returning to the microphone, spinning the interruption into a story about the passionate dedication of our donor families. But I had what I needed: the photo, the recording, and most importantly, Harold's reaction, witnessed by a room full of Riverton's elite, captured by an event photographer, and recorded by at least a dozen phones. He'd shown his hand with that shove, revealed how desperate he was to keep that number quiet. In my car, I pulled up the photo again, 23,300,000, Mom's money, my inheritance, and Harold had just physically assaulted me to keep me from asking about it. I touched my shoulder where he'd pushed me, already feeling the bruise forming. Time to find out exactly what that money was really funding. My dining table looked like a crime scene. If crimes were committed with spreadsheets and tax documents, 3 monitors glowed in my apartment's darkness, each displaying different pieces of the financial puzzle I'd been assembling for 72 hours straight. The skills that made me good at hospital compliance work, pattern recognition, document analysis, following money like breadcrumbs through a forest of regulations, they all kicked into overdrive after the gala. I'd taken a week off work, told my boss I had a family emergency, wasn't even a lie. Start with what you know. That's Investigation 101. I knew the Evelyn Whitmore Family Trust existed. I knew the initial value, $3.8 million from Mom's life insurance, investments, and the sale of her medical device patents. I knew Harold became sole trustee after her death in 2018. What I didn't know was how $2.3 million of it ended up labeled as donations from an endowment in my name. The Foundation's 990-PF forms were public record, downloadable from the IRS website. I started there, working backward from the current year. The Leah Whitmore Endowment first appeared in 2019, 1 year after Mom died. Initial contribution, $500,000, then $400,000 in 2020, another $600,000 in 2021. The pattern continued, totaling $2.3 million. But foundations have to report their funding sources. That's where things got interesting. I cross-referenced the dates with construction permits, property records, and contractor invoices, all public information if you know where to look. Every major donation from my endowment coincided with infrastructure improvements at something called the Riverside Community Center. Except the Riverside Community Center's address matched a plot of land owned by Slate Development Holdings, LLC, Harold's company. My coffee had gone cold hours ago. I pushed it aside and pulled up the next document, a contract between the Arts and Healing Foundation and Evergreen Construction for community facility improvements. The contract amount, $2.1 million, the payment source, restricted funds from the Leah Whitmore Endowment. Restricted funds, money earmarked for specific purposes, money that, coincidentally, went straight to a construction company that had worked on 4 of Harold's previous development projects. I grabbed my phone and photographed everything. In compliance work, redundancy is your friend. Cloud backups, physical printouts, photos on multiple devices. You never know which copy will save your case. The trust documents were harder to access. I'd needed to file formal requests, wait for processing, pay fees, but 3 days after the gala, a manila envelope arrived by certified mail. Inside were the original trust papers and, this was the kicker, an amendment dated 3 months before Mom's death. Mom's signature was at the bottom, shaky but recognizable. The amendment gave Harold full discretionary power to distribute funds for charitable purposes that honor the spirit of Evelyn's philanthropic goals. I knew that signature. I'd watched her practice it during chemo, when her hands trembled from the medications. "I want to make sure everything's legal," she'd said. "For you." But the witness signature made my stomach drop. Dr. Marcus Fitzgerald, Mom's oncologist, who, according to a quick search, now served on the board of the Riverside Community Center, the same community center sitting on Harold's land. The final piece came from an unexpected source, a Facebook post from Colin, dated last month. He was standing in front of a construction site, hard hat perched on his head, grinning beside Harold. Proud to announce Slate Development's newest project, Riverton Landing. This mixed-use development will transform the old Riverside area into a premier shopping and residential destination. The old Riverside area, where the community center sat, where $2.3 million of my mother's money had built infrastructure, water lines, electrical systems, road improvements, that would service Harold's new development. He wasn't just stealing from the trust, he was laundering it through a fake charity, using my name as cover while he built the bones of his next fortune on my mother's grave. I sat back, shoulders still aching from his shove. The bruise had bloomed purple and green, a perfect palm print of evidence, but bruises fade, paper trails don't. Every transaction, every contract, every amended document and board connection and construction permit, I had it all, organized in neat digital folders with backup copies stored in 3 different cloud services. In the morning, I'd start making calls. Lawyers who specialized in trust litigation, the State Attorney General's office, the IRS nonprofit division. But tonight, I had one more search to run. I pulled up the banking records for Midwestern Capital, the primary lender for Harold's developments. Buried in the loan documents for Riverton Landing was a covenant, a promise that all infrastructure improvements would be funded through legitimate arm's-length transactions. Using charity money to prep your own commercial development? That wasn't arm's length, that was fraud. And if there was one thing banks hated more than losing money, it was being lied to about where money came from. I smiled, probably the first real smile since the gala. Harold thought he was building an empire on my mother's legacy. He was actually building his own prison. Most people think estate law is boring, Ava Mercer said, sliding her business card across the polished conference table. Those people have never seen a trust used as a personal piggy bank. I'd chosen Ava carefully, boutique firm, no connections to Harold's country club network, and a reputation for taking down bigger opponents. Her office walls displayed newspaper clippings of her victories, including a case where she'd recovered $4 million from a charity fraud scheme. "This is thorough," she said, scrolling through my documentation on her tablet. "Hospital compliance training?" "Something like that." "Well, you've made my job easier. This amendment," she tapped the screen, "giving Harold discretionary charitable powers, classic manipulation of a vulnerable person. Your mother was in stage 4 when this was signed?" 3 months from the end. Ava's expression hardened. "We'll need more than documents. Witnesses who can testify about your mother's state of mind. People who saw Harold's behavior patterns. I might have someone." I thought of Nora Vale, the event coordinator who'd been at the gala. She'd called me the day after. Voice careful. "I wanted to check if you were okay. That was intense." We'd met for coffee. Turns out, Nora had been keeping her own records. "Harold provides the donor lists personally," she'd told me, sliding a folder across the cafe table. "Insists on approving every label himself. I always thought it was strange. Board members don't usually handle those details." Now I gave Ava Nora's contact information. She'll testify about the label process, and she has 3 years of emails where Harold specifically directed which names went on which donations. Good. Who else? Daryl Knott. I'd reached out to the forensic accountant through LinkedIn, explaining I needed help with a complex trust case. He'd agreed to review my findings pro bono after I mentioned the charity angle. He specializes in nonprofit fraud, says the pattern is textbook, create restricted funds, control both sides of the transaction, make it look like community benefit. Ava made notes. "We'll need him for expert testimony. What about the construction side?" "Working on it," I hesitated. "There might be someone at Midwestern Capital who'd talk. They hold the loans for Harold's developments." "Might be?" I sent them a notice, as a potential beneficiary of the trust, alerting them to possible fraud affecting their collateral. It was the aggressive move, but legal. If Harold used misappropriated funds for infrastructure that's securing their loan, they could call the loan. Ava smiled. "You're not just thinking litigation, you're thinking leverage." I want him to feel what my mother felt, helpless, watching everything he built slip away. Speaking of which, Ava pulled out her phone. "I have a contact at the Attorney General's office, white-collar division. They're always interested in charity fraud, especially when it involves elderly victims in 7 figures. While she made the call, I thought about allies and enemies. Harold had the foundation board, his business network, Colin's blind loyalty, but I had something better, people who'd been waiting for someone to stand up to him. Like Patricia Morse, Harold's former administrative assistant. She'd reached out after seeing gossip about the gala incident on Facebook. "I left Slate Development 2 years ago." She'd written, "I have files you might find interesting, employment contracts, board minutes, things that were supposed to be shredded." Or James Riverton, whose family name graced half the buildings in town. He'd pulled me aside at the grocery store. "My grandfather donated the land where that community center sits, for actual community use, not commercial development. I've been wondering why the city council won't return my calls about it." Even Dr. Fitzgerald's nurse had contacted me. "The doctor's retired now, early onset dementia," she'd said carefully. "But I was there when Mr. Slate brought those papers. I remember thinking it was odd, asking a dying woman to sign financial documents during treatment." Each ally brought pieces, documents, memories, willingness to speak truth to power. Daryl ran the numbers and found more discrepancies. Nora provided emails showing Harold's direct involvement. Patricia's files revealed a pattern of board manipulation going back years. "The AG is interested," Ava announced, ending her call. "They want to see everything. If they open an investigation, it becomes public record. Media will pick it up." Good. I thought of Harold's careful image management, his terror of public shame. What about the trust? "I'll file for an emergency freeze tomorrow. Given the evidence of ongoing misappropriation, we should get it. That stops any more transfers until the court sorts this out." "And the bank?" Ava grinned. "Oh, that's the beautiful part. See? When you alert a lender to potential fraud affecting their security interest, they have a fiduciary duty to investigate. Can't claim ignorance later. Your notice just lit a 90-day fuse on every loan covenant Harold has with them." I felt something I hadn't experienced since finding that candle label. Hope. Not the false kind Harold peddled at fundraisers, but real hope, the kind built on evidence, allies, and the slow machinery of justice grinding into motion. "One more thing," I said, pulling out my phone to show the event photographer's shots. The moment of the shove. Harold's face twisted in fury, my body off balance. "Battery charges?" "Assault, technically, misdemeanor, but it establishes pattern of intimidation." Ava studied the images. "Several witnesses?" "About 200, plus professional photos, plus security footage the hotel mysteriously can't find but definitely has." "We'll subpoena it." She closed her tablet. "Leah, I need you to understand. Once we file, Harold will come at you with everything he has. His reputation, his business, potentially his freedom are at stake." I thought of my mother in those final months, too weak to fight but still trying to protect me. Of Harold's voice. "Don't open your mouth about that number." "Let him come," I said. "I've got receipts. I want to make things right," I told Harold over the phone, letting exhaustion creep into my voice. "The lawyers, the investigation, it's too much. Maybe we can work this out as a family." The silence stretched so long I wondered if he'd hung up. Then, "The next board meeting is Thursday, 2 o'clock. We can discuss your concerns in a civilized manner." Perfect. I'd counted on his ego, his need to control the narrative. Harold Slate didn't have problems he couldn't manage with a boardroom and an audience. "Could I present something to the board?" I asked, adding just enough hesitation. "About best practices for donation documentation? I've been researching, and I think I misunderstood the foundation's processes." "That would be appropriate." I could hear his smile. "I'll have Margaret add you to the agenda." Thursday arrived. Gray and drizzling, I dressed carefully, professional blazer, modest jewelry, the image of a compliant woman who'd learned her place. The foundation's boardroom hadn't changed since Mom's funeral reception. Dark wood paneling, oil portraits of former board presidents, that suffocating sense of old money making quiet decisions. "Leah!" Margaret Winslow greeted me with air kisses. Harold explained about the misunderstanding. "We're all family here." The board assembled, 8 members including Harold, all watching as I set up my presentation. I'd titled it, "Ensuring Donor Intent, Best practices for gift documentation. Boring, safe, exactly what they'd expect from someone backing down. Thank you for this opportunity, I began, clicking to my first slide. Recent events made me realize I didn't understand how the foundation processes major gifts. Slide 2. A flowchart showing standard nonprofit donation procedures. Most foundations follow this pattern: donor initiation, written authorization, third-party verification. Heads nodded. Harold relaxed in his chair. Slide 3. But the Arts and Healing Foundation has innovated a more streamlined approach. I clicked again. An organizational chart appeared showing Harold's central position in donation processing. Our board co-chair personally manages donor lists, approves all naming opportunities, and directs fund allocation. This hands-on approach ensures efficient operations. Very efficient, Harold agreed, missing the trap in his eagerness to appear in control. Slide 4 showed email excerpts, carefully redacted but recognizable to anyone in the room. This personal attention to detail extends to direct communication with vendors, contractors, and beneficiary organizations. Board members shifted, recognizing their own correspondence. For example, I continued, when the Leah Whitmore Endowment made its first contribution, the process was remarkably streamlined, no lengthy applications or committee reviews, just decisive action from leadership. We pride ourselves on cutting through red tape, Harold said. When donors want to make an impact, we facilitate that. Could you explain that process? I asked innocently. For the minutes? The board secretary, an elderly man named Richard Torrance, looked up from his laptop. Yes, that would be helpful for our documentation. Harold straightened. This was his arena, performing expertise for an audience. When a donor approaches us with a significant gift, I personally ensure their intentions are honored. The Whitmore Endowment, for instance, specifically directed funds toward community infrastructure that would serve therapeutic purposes. You personally directed those funds? I oversee all major allocations, yes. And the donor lists for events, like the Night of Candles? I approve every label to ensure accuracy. He was warming up now, enjoying the spotlight. It's attention to detail that sets us apart. I clicked to slide 5, a simple question in 48-point font. Who initiates restricted donations? Well, Harold said, that varies. Sometimes donors approach us. Sometimes we identify opportunities that align with their interests. And for the Leah Whitmore Endowment specifically? He hesitated. Board members leaned forward. That was a unique situation, he said carefully. Given the family connection, I facilitated the establishment of the endowment to honor my late wife's wishes. So you initiated it? I structured it according to Evelyn's philanthropic vision. Click, slide 6. Board resolution requirements for restricted funds over $100,000. The foundation's own bylaws filled the screen. I'd pulled them from their website. Section 4.3.2. Any restricted fund exceeding $100,000 requires majority board approval and written donor authorization. Did the board vote on establishing the Leah Whitmore Endowment? I asked. Silence. Richard Torrance typed furiously. Margaret Winslow cleared her throat. I don't recall that coming to vote. Because it didn't need to, Harold said quickly. As trustee of the Evelyn Whitmore Trust, I had authority to direct charitable distributions. So you used trust funds to create an endowment in my name, without my knowledge or consent, then personally directed those funds to infrastructure projects? I kept my voice mild, curious. You're twisting things. I'm clarifying. For the minutes, I looked at Richard. Are you getting all this? Every word, he said quietly. Click. Slide 7 showed my final question. Does the foundation maintain documentation of donor consent for all named endowments? Board members exchanged glances. The legal liability hung in the air like smoke. Of course we do, Harold snapped. Wonderful. Then you can provide the board with my written consent to establish a $2.3 million endowment? His face flushed. Your consent wasn't required. The trust names me as beneficiary, not you as unlimited charitable director. I clicked to my final slide, a photo of the candle label. This foundation published my name as a donor of $2.3 million. Either I consented to that donation, or someone committed fraud. Which would you like the minutes to reflect? Richard Torrance stopped typing. Every board member stared at Harold. I think, Margaret Winslow said slowly, we need to see all documentation related to the Whitmore endowment, immediately. And perhaps, another board member added, we should discuss whether personal management of donor relations is really the best practice going forward. Harold stood abruptly. This is an ambush. No, I said, closing my laptop. This is transparency, something Mom believed in, something any legitimate foundation should welcome. I gathered my things while the board erupted in heated discussion. Richard Torrance caught my eye and nodded slightly. He'd recorded everything. Harold's admissions preserved in official minutes. At the door, I turned back. Oh, Harold? My lawyer will be in touch about that written consent you definitely have. His face was the color of old brick, fury and fear warring in his eyes. I walked out, leaving him to explain to his board how he'd gambling their reputation on a dead woman's money and a stepdaughter's name. The call from Midwestern Capital came at 7 a.m. Friday. I was ready, sitting at my dining table with Ava on speakerphone and every document within reach. Ms. Whitmore, this is Sandra Chen from Midwestern Capital's Risk Management Division. We received your notice regarding potential irregularities with the Riverton Landing development. Yes, I said, keeping my voice neutral. As a beneficiary of the trust whose funds may have been misappropriated, I felt obligated to alert you. We've completed our preliminary review. Papers rustled on her end. The infrastructure improvements at the Riverside Community Center site do appear to directly benefit the Riverton Landing project. Our loan covenant specifically requires all related party transactions to be disclosed and conducted at arm's length. Ava leaned forward but stayed silent. This was my show. According to public records, Sandra continued, Slate Development received $2.1 million in foundation funds for community center improvements. These improvements, water, sewer, electrical upgrades, are now being utilized for the commercial development. Is that your understanding? That's what the documentation indicates, yes. And these funds originated from an endowment created in your name without your consent? Correct. I've never authorized any charitable donations to the foundation. More paper shuffling, then, Mr. Slate has 10 days to provide documentation proving these transactions were legitimate and properly disclosed. If he cannot, we'll issue a formal notice of default. After she hung up, Ava smiled grimly. 10 days. Think he can manufacture consent documents that fast? He'll try. I pulled up my email. But he has bigger problems. The message from Bridle Path Partners had arrived during the call. The private equity firm had been set to invest $12.8 million in Riverton Landing's second phase. Their tone was professionally arctic. Given the allegations of financial irregularities surrounding Phase 1 infrastructure funding, Bridle Path Partners is suspending all capital commitments pending resolution of these matters. My phone buzzed. Colin. What have you done? His voice was shrill. Dad's been on calls all morning. The bank's threatening to call the loan. Investors are backing out. You're destroying everything. I'm documenting everything, I corrected. There's a difference. He's talking about suing you for defamation. Discovery would be fascinating. I kept my tone mild. How's your board position at the community center? By the way, the one Dad appointed you to last year? He hung up. The next call was from Patricia Morse, Harold's former assistant. Thought you should know. Harold just scheduled an emergency meeting with his lawyers. Also, he's been calling board members all morning. Margaret Winslow won't take his calls. The Riverton Ledger's website updated at noon. Questions arise about Arts and Healing Foundation donations. They'd been careful, citing only public records and sources familiar with the matter, but they'd connected the dots. Mysterious endowment, infrastructure improvements, commercial development benefits. My phone rang again, unknown number. Ms. Whitmore, This is Thomas Bradley from the State Attorney General's office. We've received some interesting documentation about the Riverton Arts and Healing Foundation. I understand you've been researching these matters? I have concerns about my mother's trust and donations made in my name. Would you be available to meet with our white-collar crime unit Monday morning? Absolutely. By 3 p.m., the ripples had become waves. The foundation's website went down for maintenance. Harold's development company issued a terse statement about reviewing all financial relationships to ensure continued transparency. 3 more board members called Harold's practices into question. But the death blow came from an unexpected source. Leah? The voice on the phone was tremulous. This is Dr. Fitzgerald. Harold's tame doctor, the one who'd witnessed Mom's trust amendment. I know my memory isn't what it was, he continued. But my nurse showed me the news stories. I need to tell someone. Your mother wasn't fully conscious when she signed those papers. The morphine dose had just been increased. Harold said it was urgent, that waiting would cause tax problems. Would you be willing to tell that to investigators? Yes. It's been weighing on me. Evelyn was a good woman. She talked about you constantly, how proud she was, how she wanted to secure your future. I thanked him and immediately called Ava. The witness is cracking. Beautiful. With his testimony, the trust amendment could be invalidated. Everything Harold did after that would be fraud. My apartment felt different that evening. Lighter, for years. I'd carried the weight of being the unwanted stepchild, the burden Harold so generously tolerated. Now I understood. I'd never been a burden. I'd been a threat, the rightful heir to what he wanted. The final Friday call came at 8 p.m. Harold. Name your price, he said without preamble. Excuse me? To make this go away, the investigation, the bank, all of it, how much? You think this is about money? Everything's about money. His voice was raw. The foundation will return the full amount to the trust. You'll get your $2.3 million plus interest. Just call off the dogs. And let you keep developing on infrastructure built with my mother's money? I'll cut you in. 20% of Riverton Landing. That's $8 million in projected profits. I almost laughed. Even now, he thought he could buy his way out. Harold, I said softly, do you remember what you told me at Mom's funeral? Family supports family. You were right. I'm supporting Mom's real family. Every person who received legitimate help from her charity work, not your fake foundation, not your development schemes, her actual legacy. You ungrateful. Monday morning, I meet with the Attorney General. Tuesday, Midwestern Capital reviews your loan. Wednesday, the Foundation Board meets to discuss your removal. You have a weekend to get your affairs in order. Leah, please. I hung up and turned off my phone. Outside, rain pelted the windows, but inside, for the first time since Mom died, I felt warm. The Foundation's glass conference room felt like a fishbowl that Tuesday afternoon. Through the transparent walls, I could see Foundation staff pretending to work while stealing glances at the gathering storm inside. The players had assembled. Harold at one end of the table, flanked by 2 lawyers whose Armani suits couldn't hide their sweat. The Foundation's legal counsel, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. 3 board members, including Margaret Winslow, whose expression could have frozen champagne. A representative from Midwestern Capital, Sandra Chen in person, which told me they weren't playing around. And at my side, Ava Mercer, calm as a sniper. I placed a white candle at the center of the table. What's that for? Harold snapped. Ambiance. I pulled out a lighter. Shall we begin? Before anyone could object, I lit the candle and placed a new label beside it. Evelyn Whitmore Memorial. In honor of Leah. No monetary transfer authorized. This is ridiculous, Harold started. This is evidence, Ava interrupted, sliding copies of a bound document to everyone. Tab 1 contains the board minutes from Thursday's meeting, where Mr. Slate admitted to personally initiating and directing the Leah Whitmore endowment without donor consent. Harold's lawyer flipped through pages. That was taken out of context. Tab 2, Ava continued. Shows the original trust documents and the amendment allegedly signed by Evelyn Whitmore. Dr. Fitzgerald's sworn affidavit states she was under heavy sedation and lacked capacity to consent. Tab 3. I picked up the narrative. Traces $2.3 million from my mother's trust through the foundation to Evergreen Construction, then to infrastructure improvements on land owned by Slate Development. I clicked my laptop, projecting the flowchart onto the wall screen. Every transaction is documented. Every contract links back to Harold's interests. Sandra Chen spoke for the first time. Mr. Slate, does your development company deny benefiting from these infrastructure improvements? Infrastructure serves the entire community. That's not what I asked. Harold's senior lawyer touched his arm. My client maintains all transactions were legal and within his authority as trustee. Then you can provide documentation of board approval for the endowment? Margaret Winslow's voice cut like crystal. Because I've reviewed 6 years of minutes. There's no vote, no discussion, nothing. I pulled up the next slide. Photos from the night of candles. This is Harold physically assaulting me when I questioned the donation labeled in my name. The sequence played out. The grab, the shove, my stumble, multiple angles from different phones, time-stamped and authenticated. That was a misunderstanding, Harold began. Tab 4 contains the police report I filed. I said, assault charges are pending. Sandra Chen had seen enough. Mr. Slate, Midwestern Capital hereby serves formal notice of default on loans totaling $18.7 million. You have 72 hours to cure the default by proving all infrastructure funding was legitimate and properly disclosed. Harold's face cycled through colors I'd never seen in nature. You can't. The development is 60% complete. Should have thought of that before lying on your loan application. Sandra placed a sealed envelope on the table. Our attorneys will be in touch. The foundation's lawyer cleared her throat. Given these revelations, I must advise the board to immediately suspend Mr. Slate from all fiduciary roles pending investigation. Seconded, Margaret said instantly. All in favor? Every board member's hand went up. You're making a mistake, Harold snarled, but the fight was leaving him. I built this foundation. I raised millions. You stole millions, I corrected, from a dying woman who trusted you, from a foundation that believed in you, from investors who backed you. I stood, pulled out my phone, and showed them one final image, the original candle label from the gala. 2.3 million with my name on it. You wanted me to be quiet about that number, but numbers don't lie. Harold, people do. This is extortion. This is accounting. I turned to the board. The Attorney General's office has the same documentation. They'll be in touch about recovering misappropriated funds and determining criminal liability. Harold lunged to his feet, and for a second I thought he might try to grab me again, but his lawyers held him back, whispering urgently about criminal charges and civil liability. One more thing, Ava said pleasantly. We'll be filing for immediate removal as trustee and full accounting of the Evelyn Whitmore Trust. The court will appoint an independent administrator to recover all misappropriated funds. You vindictive little... Harold bit off the words, perhaps remembering the recording devices on every phone in the room. I blew out the candle, smoke curling toward the ceiling. That's for Mom, the woman you robbed while she was dying, the one person who saw something worth saving in you. The room erupted, lawyers threatening, board members demanding answers, Sandra Chen on her phone initiating asset freezes, but I was already walking out. Ava beside me, leaving Harold to face the inferno he'd built with stolen matches. In the hallway, foundation staff stood in clusters, watching through the glass as Harold's empire collapsed in real time. Someone started a slow clap, then another. By the time I reached the elevator, the entire floor was applauding. Feel good? Ava asked as the doors closed. No, I admitted, but it feels right, and sometimes that's enough. Through the closing doors, I caught a final glimpse of Harold, slumped in his chair, lawyers buzzing around him like flies on a carcass, the king of other people's money, finally paying his own bill. The morning news hit like a sledgehammer. Prominent developer Harold Slate faces multiple investigations. The Riverton Ledger ran it above the fold with a photo from the foundation meeting. Harold surrounded by lawyers. His empire in ruins. My phone buzzed nonstop. I let it ring, focusing instead on the document Ava had just sent. Emergency motion for removal of trustee, granted. The judge signed it an hour ago. Ava explained when I called. Harold's frozen out of your mother's trust. Court appointed a neutral administrator who'll pursue full recovery. What about criminal charges? AG's presenting to a grand jury next week. Wire fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, money laundering through a nonprofit. He's looking at serious time. Through my apartment window, I watched normal people living normal lives. Joggers, dog walkers, parents with strollers, none of them stealing from the dead to build shopping centers. The calls kept coming. I finally answered one from Patricia Morse. You need to see this, she said. Harold called an all-staff meeting at Slate Development. Someone's live streaming. I pulled up the feed on my laptop. Harold stood before his employees, tie askew. That camera-ready smile finally cracked. Temporary setback, he was saying. Misunderstandings that will be resolved. Then someone off camera. Is it true you stole from your dead wife's trust? Harold's face went purple. Meeting's over. But it wasn't. The stream kept rolling as employees peppered him with questions about their jobs, their paychecks, their futures. The emperor had no clothes, and everyone could see. The next call was Colin. You destroyed him, he said, but the anger was gone, replaced by something hollow. 40 years building his reputation, gone. He destroyed himself. I just kept the receipts. The house is being seized. Cars. Everything. Mom, he caught himself. Evelyn's things are still there. I'll have the administrator contact you about retrieving them. Silence, then. Did you ever consider just letting it go, moving on? I thought about Mom in her final days, worried about leaving me secure, about Harold's hand on my shoulder, shoving me back, about $2.3 million with my name on it, funding his dreams while Mom's charity work was perverted. No, I said. I never considered that. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Margaret Winslow stood at my door with a bottle of wine and an envelope. Peace offering, she said, and an invitation. Over Pinot Noir, she explained. The foundation board had held an emergency session. Harold was out, permanently. They wanted to restructure, return to actual charity work. We'd like you on the board, she said. Help us rebuild. Do what your mother would have wanted. I opened the envelope. Inside was a photo from a foundation event years ago. Mom standing with a group of art therapy recipients. Her smile genuine despite the chemo exhaustion. She believed in our mission, Margaret continued. Before Harold corrupted it, help us honor that. I'll think about it. After she left, I sat with the photo. Mom looked so happy, surrounded by people her donations had actually helped. Not construction crews or development sites, real people, real healing. The final call of the day was from Sandra Chen at Midwestern Capital. Thought you'd want to know, she said. Harold couldn't cure the default. We're calling the full $18.7 million. Bridal Path formally withdrew. 2 more lenders are following suit. What happens to Riverton Landing? Bankruptcy. The assets will be auctioned. The community center land reverts to the city, actually becomes a community center. She paused. You did good work. Clean documentation, clear trail. Wish all whistleblowers were this thorough. That evening, I drove to Riverside Cemetery. Mom's headstone was simple. She'd insisted on that. Beloved mother, cherished friend. I'd brought a white candle, one without any labels or dollar signs, just light and darkness. He can't hurt anyone else with your money, I told her. It's over. The wind picked up, making the flame dance, but it didn't go out, like Mom's real legacy. Not the money Harold stole, but the example she set. Stand up, document everything, protect what matters. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number with a photo. The foundation's conference room. Someone had placed a small placard where Harold used to sit. This seat reserved for ethical leadership only. I smiled, blew out the candle, and headed home. Harold was finished. His loans called, his reputation destroyed, criminal charges pending. The man who'd pushed me aside for so long had been pushed off his own pedestal by nothing more than truth and paperwork. At my mother's funeral, Harold had said family supports family. He was right. I'd supported the only family that mattered, my mother's memory and the people she'd truly wanted to help. The rest was just arithmetic, and I'd always been good with numbers. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to hear what you think.